What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Sporting Cast podcast. I'm your host, Lucas Red. In just a few short moments, we will be welcoming Marc Silverman to the show. Silvy is the co-host of the Waddle and Silvy show on Monday through Friday on ESPN Chicago from 2 to 6 Central Time, and you can also catch him on YouTube and Switch. Silvy's been a big part of my life pretty much since 2007 when this show debuted. Growing up, going to practice with my dad in the evenings, we'd be listening to the Waddle and Silvy show. And Silvy and my dad had a very similar path of diagnoses. My dad lost his battle to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2021. And Silvy's overcome that. So we're going to listen about Silvy's journey overcoming cancer, how he got into Chicago sports radio, and who his supporting cast is. So sit back, relax, and we'll have Silvy on shortly. And the Sporting Cast podcast is pleased to welcome Marc Silverman to the show. Silvy, thank you for joining. We've had a little bit of adversity with some technical difficulties in the past. Appreciate you willing to come back on and share your journey. Silvy, how's your summer been with Chicago sports and your family, and what's on the agenda for the rest of summer?
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a dangerous question with my Cubs playing as poorly as they are. So, a week ago from when we're recording this, we're at the Cubs game with the family, and that was the 18-3 game. So, but the White Sox are giving us something to talk about. Even though I'm not a White Sox fan, I'm not a hater, and we have plenty of White Sox fans as the home of the Sox who want to call in and talk about them. And then we're excited for Bears training camp. So we can't wait. Everything's great.
What's more likely, you to be on the swing for the Cubs season, or you to be on the swing for how the Bears are handling the stadium again?
I don't think the stadium stuff is swing worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's maddening. I think it's frustrating, but I don't think it's like our business will be the same as Bears fans. We'll just go to Soldier Field anyway this year. Nothing would change till 2031 or 32 anyway. So I don't think it's worth getting all hot and bothered about the Bears stadium thing, except the fact that maybe they're just not run business-wise as well as we would like.
No, that makes sense. So, Silvy, about your journey, being from Skokie, Illinois, I know the Chicago sports have played a big role in your life, and especially the Cubs and the Bulls. What was it like just growing up, and how did you become a fan of Chicago sports?
Yeah, it was, just something that I was exposed to as a child. My mom was actually the bigger sports fan than my dad. She loved going to Cubs games. My grandfather was a inaugural season ticket holder of the Bulls. So I got to go to Bulls games in the mid-70s, starting in the mid-70s. I was born in 71. So long before Michael. Michael was drafted in 84. I started going to games in the 70s before there were any sellouts at the Chicago Stadium, and I was hooked. It was just, I loved going to games, whether it was at Wrigley Field or at the Chicago Stadium. I didn't go to as many Bears games. I barely went to any Bears games as a child. We would just watch Bears on the television. So my two favorite sports were baseball and the Bulls back in the day.
And so, growing up, I know a lot of certain players that made a big impact on your life just from a fandom standpoint. What's your favorite player when you were growing up?
Boy, I'm going to probably name some guys that many people as you're my age, remember. With the Bulls, first of all, Orlando Woolridge was drafted out of Notre Dame in the early 80s. I loved Orlando Woolridge. Artis Gilmore before that, the A-Train, Reggie Theus. Those were John Mengelt. His nickname was Crash. So I still had a bunch, even though they weren't great. I was right at the end when I was really little of Norm Van Leer and Jerry Sloan. So I just caught the tail end of their career. With the Cubs, it was Bill Buckner, Dave Kingman. And then finally when I was 12 and 13 was the 84 season where it was Rhino, and Gary Matthews was my favorite player who played left field, the Sarge. That whole 84 team was sucked. It was my first exposure to the Cubs winning. Leon Durham, that I could go through the whole lineup, really.
So, Silvy, me and a lot of others, especially my age growing up, we know you as one of the voices of Chicago sports radio. Just growing up listening to you guys, I know you've made a lot of impact on many people's lives, including mine. But your journey did not start in Chicago sports radio. You had to work your way up going to Southern Illinois. I know you had some pit stops in Colorado and up in Iowa. What was that journey like, and how did you get back to Chicago?
Well, I never really mentioned the Colorado stuff because it was so quick. So
Mhm.
it truly was a pit stop because when I got out of college, and it's so long to explain for when I just go through the resume, I wanted a job out of college, so I took a news job in Colorado, news radio, as the quote news director. They didn't have a sports opening, so I wanted to have a job as soon as the school year ended. So I took that. It was always conditioned that we would be, that if you wanted to do sports, you can always do news and veer into sports. I hated it out there. There were no apartments for lease. I couldn't get settled. And then I got a call from my counselor at SIU where they had this was 2 weeks in too. So it's my gig. And that this sports director's job came open in Northwest Iowa. So we talked on the phone, the owner of the radio station and me, and he hired me. And I left Colorado after 2 weeks. My boss in Colorado cursed me out, said that I would never make it, And I get it because it was a total lack of commitment, but I wanted to do sports and I had to look out for what was best for me.
Mhm.
And because I was miserable, so far away from home, I went to Northwest Iowa and I was there for a good year and a half. And I that's where I got my hands dirty, my feet wet, and was able to do a bunch of stuff.
And Sylvie, one of the big things that you've talked about, especially on air and in the past other stories and articles, is just covering the 1990 Bulls, and especially with the passing of Stacey King. What was the impact not only that Stacey made, but just the 1990 Bulls made on you?
Yeah, so the first three championships in the 90s, I was still in college. So I got to witness all that as a fan by going to a lot of games. When I left Iowa, that was in February of 95 to take this internship. It was a paid internship. WGN Radio, I was promised 3 months. Michael was playing baseball, and no one was covering Bulls games then. No one was covering Hawks games. So as the intern, I said, look, I've had a paid job before. I'm happy to go. You don't have to pay me. I'll go and I'll, record everything. And they started giving me, opportunities to go cover the Bulls and the Blackhawks. And with every opportunity, I got a little more trust. I get to be on the air a little bit more. Then when the rumors started swirling that Michael was coming back from baseball, I covered Bulls practice. They loved what they heard. And then they sent me to Michael's first game in Indianapolis. You're in Indy, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
his first game in March of 95 was in Indy, him wearing number 45. So that was my first real road trip in Chicago sports. And from there, I just, I got hired 5 hours a week. I got hired 35 hours a week. And then finally, like a year after my internship, I got hired full time.
No,
And yeah.
no. So Sylvie, since you said that, what's your advice maybe to interns or just people starting their young professional careers, whether it's sports or anything else for that matter? Just being able to not only adapt and put yourself out there, because it sounds like you made the initiative to do that extra type of work.
Yeah, I've come across so many interns who just don't create their own path. You know what I mean? Like one phrase that I constantly hear that I always tell kids is, um, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But it could be up to you to network, to create relationships of people who you know. For me, the who you know and nothing to do with my parents didn't know anybody.
Mhm.
My dad was an electrician. My mom is still an office manager, and they didn't know anybody in the field. So I got to know people by calling that, and it's sort of the way I've lived my life, where you make your own breaks. Everyone's gonna get luck, but you're gonna end up making your own breaks. So I always say, do as much as you can. there's a fine line between being aggressive and being a nag. So try to find that line. Don't be overbearing, but do as many things as possible. And it's always an investment on your future. Look at it as that, where you may not get paid up front, and a lot of people are thinking, oh, they're going to take advantage of me if I do something for free. The way I look at it is, it's like playing, the stock market. It's a long game here. It's building up trust, and it's making an investment in your career that will pay off later.
No, Sylvian, I love that. And to be honest, that's how kind of you and I met, just passing past that Prime 47. But a reason I did that was listening to you in the past, because one story that resonates with me was, even though it wasn't Caleb Williams' dad, I believe, but when you ran next to him down in Indianapolis, and that story of, you just approaching Caleb and his crew, to your point, speaks volumes of not only are you saying it with your words, but you did it by your actions as well. But no, Silvy,
I wanted to get him on the air, and like the one thing that I've learned over the years was, before it was like, hey, get everyone on air or not, like, but the relationships for getting them on the air are created by those meetings. Mm-hmm. And even though he said no, I still walked with him, talked to him for a few minutes. He could not have been friendlier. It's where he totally dispelled any rumors that he was some sort of a diva. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to establish those relationships, and then that way you get to know someone and they trust you down the road.
No, that's good stuff. And Silvy, one thing that resonates with me and kind of what we talked about, my dad passed away of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma back in 2021. You were diagnosed with that. Was it 2020 was the year for you?
Yeah.
And, fortunately, thank God you've been able to persevere that, and you're willing to share your story a little bit about that. Last May was National Cancer Awareness Research Month. I guess first off, what was your diagnosis like, and your willingness to share it on air, and then your passion for the National Cancer Awareness Research Month, especially with you and your mom?
Yeah. My mom is a cancer survivor now too. She had a double mastectomy. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in the winter, had that surgery in January, and she's doing great. They feel like they got it all. And she's working now. I was diagnosed in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. I wasn't feeling well for a while. I wasn't feeling like myself, and it went down like a whole thing. Like just like I do with my career. You have to advocate for yourself if you're not feeling well, to not sit back and just say, well, I don't feel well. Hopefully next week I'll feel better. Like, if you don't feel well, you don't feel like yourself, start trying to find things, because sometimes it could take them a while. And no one, the initial internist, who I don't see anymore because I lost trust, just thought I was stressed. But I knew. And so in the spring of 2020, when I was diagnosed, I feel like I sort of reacted like how most of us react, like I remember bawling in my wife's arms. Mm-hmm. I had a 6 and 4-year-old at the time. I was wondering, would I be around to be their dad? Those are all these are all
the
these
doubts that creep into your mind. Like the doubts.
What's that?
The doubts that creep into your mind.
Sure. And like, but that's all fair. Like, I think it's important to vocalize those types of things. I got myself a therapist. I got myself also a mentor through Immerman's Angels, someone who had been through the battle. So that way I could have the best tools, not just with the best medicines, but also to the mind is very important. So I think it's important to take a couple days to feel bad, but then to put your feet down and say, I'm here to fight. And then it's positivity from there. So, and that's how I looked at it. My family looked at it, and we just attacked.
Mm-hmm. And well, thank God you did. So I know people still love listening to you on air, and your boys and your wife still love having you as part of your family. Another follow up to that is, life is, everyone goes through shit at some point, right? Some have it worse than others, but what's your advice to either young athletes or professionals who are facing severe setbacks, whether it's an injury, a sickness, or whatever it may be that's challenging them? How did you advise others to go through those situations?
Well, I'm a huge proponent of the mental aspect. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a doctor. What I always tell people when I talk to them about a diagnosis, and I'm always willing to talk to somebody, is trust your doctors, trust the science, trust the medicine. There's been so many advances, and just like anybody who plays sports, whether you blow out your ACL, trust the advancements we've made there. Tommy John surgery, Achilles, the way athletes are coming back from, but it's a mental grind. Like, and that's the thing is, I'm a big proponent of giving the advice from the mental standpoint. And I think it's important to talk. I think it's important to vocalize when you're having doubts. I think it's important when you're having a bad day to note it and understand it and to say, okay, today's bad, but tomorrow will be better. Or if today's a great day, today's a great day, and I'm going to enjoy this and live in this as long as I can here. And then whatever happens tomorrow, I'll face that tomorrow. So, like, appreciate the good days, talk through the bad days, knowing that those won't last, and just getting through it the oldest cliche is one step at a time. But when it comes to your health, when it comes to battling through adversity, that's all you can do. And it's the best advice you can give.
No, that's good stuff. And between like you and Jeff Dickerson, I know years ago, what has the support been like just from the ESPN Chicago family, whether it's the people you work with or the fans that listen to you?
Yeah, we've had our share of diagnosis. So JD, like before JD passed away, JD's wife passed away. And then JD, went through it. We had a salesperson by the name of Matt Haller, who we lost, who was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. And he was so courageous. But it was terrible. It's a terrible disease. Fred Hubner was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma before me. He came out and he's been a survivor. So we've had our share of cancer diagnosis at ESPN 1000, and we try to give everyone the support that they get. Like, without the people in my corner, who knows? Every word of encouragement, every text message that someone gets, you're never bothering somebody. So, like, I always think it's important to reach out to people.
Well said, Silvy Strong. So Silvy, what is the most passionate sports take that you've had on Chicago radio that you will stand by until the day you retire?
The most passionate? Well, probably that I knew Theo Epstein would do something great.
Okay.
Like, I knew, like when they hired him, this was not any hire. And I'm hoping the same thing with Ben Johnson. Like, the one thing that I never understood when we were in the fight too about other like sports takes, it's his body, I understand, was the Derrick Rose knee injury debate.
That's mine.
It always gripped my mind that he didn't want to try when he was practicing. Now it's up to him. It's his career. But I always felt like tomorrow's never promised, and he learned that. That even if it's 18 months that you sit out, does it mean that you're not going to blow it out again or re-injure yourself 10 days later? So I always would have liked to seen him try to get back on the horse. He was out of his comfort zone. I get it. And it's his life. So I'm totally hands off, but that's one that I've always believed in my mind. Who knows what would have happened if he would have at least tried.
No, Silly, it's funny that you say that, because I would say that's probably the most childhood memory I have of the ESPN Chicago, just because my dad and I kind of agreeing in the same situation of, you appreciate the guys that play, right? And again, I'm a Bulls fan, but living in Indianapolis, seeing Halliburton last year, he went for it, and he still says he doesn't regret it. And as a basketball fan, you appreciate that. But
look at what what's his name did in Boston this year. It did work out where they won, but what Tatum did was remarkable. That turnaround. So I'm always just a fan of trying. I also, another take, the hottest moments in ESPN 1000 history, it was Cuddy in the wake of the sprained knee in the NFC Championship game, and the flack that he was getting for not being able to go. we defended him there, and I think with time, it also makes all the hot takers look ridiculous that they were ripping a guy who had a grade 2 MCL sprain, where guys consistently miss weeks, even in, like Steph Curry missed like a round and a half of the playoffs, I think, with that injury. So to expect him to be able to play through that after the injury, I think that was such a bad take by many people.
And then I guess one other thing before we get to your supporting cast, what is your Mount Rushmore of guests that you've had on the show over the years? Because I know you've had a lot, you've given a lot of, Big Cat, Tirico, a couple of minutes that come to mind the recent. But
I'll probably forget people, but I think Barkley's on top, like Cuddy's in there, Barstool Big Cat's in there, and Theo's probably in there. I'm sure like you could bring up some other ones. Who I love, and Tirico's, like as you mentioned too. So if it was a top 5, he'd be on that top 5. But like the Cuddy interviews really put us on the map, I feel like, as a show, and the trust that he gave us, and it was always memorable, even if him and I were fighting. So Urlacher has been a great guest to us too. And he like from the time that he was a rookie to now, he's improved so much too as an interview. But we like I said early with the relationships, like it's something our show prides ourselves in, is the relationships. It's something I pride myself in, is keeping the relationships, and we're very, very thankful.
No, I think you guys do a good job of keeping the relationships with even just the people that call in. I'm not gonna say I'm a loyal call-in guy, but a lot of the guys that call in, you guys are, you remember who they are, and I think that means a lot from a fan standpoint. 2 more questions for you. What's it like been working with Waddle every day for the last, 20 years almost?
Yeah, it's
probably terrible. I'm just kidding.
What's that?
Probably terrible, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, what you hear is what you get.
Yep.
There's no radio persona with either of us, but like if you think that what you're hearing is like theatrics, that's who he is. That's who he is. He's legit. He's one of the most generous people I know. He is the guy who has helped me with parenting throughout the years. He's a guy like that's just naturally funny on the radio, and the way he's expanded with every sport too, from just being a football guy early to doing what he's done. Like the show could not have been what it was with me and someone else other than me and Waddle.
No, that's good. I figured you'd at some point by now been able to convert him from being a Reds fan, but it looks like his allegiances are there.
He likes the Cubs, even though he busts falls.
Yeah.
I bet you he would say he's a Cubs fan.
Really? Hey, him in that Shota uniform was pre-fire, so we'll bring it back. But
he haven't done anything since then, no.
No, Silvy, just kind of to wrap it up, just who's been the supporting cast for you, whether it's been early in your career to get into radio or just, the last 20 years at ESPN Chicago?
Oh, man.
I know there's a lot.
Oh, man. Because, Justin Craig, who still works nationally for ESPN, put our show together. Jim Pastor was the general manager, and is one of my dear friends still. Adam Delavid, I grew up with. We were camp counselors together. He took over for Justin later as the PD and always believed in us. Adam's best quality was when times were bad, he was at his best. Where, he wouldn't put the pressure on you when things were bad. He would actually hype you up. So many people. Zetterman today, Keith Williams today. Good Karma Brands purchasing the radio station in 2019 was the best thing to ever happen to the station, and I loved working for ESPN for 20 years. But when Good Karma Brands purchased our station, those guys have been spectacular. Randy Barkin, Jeff Meller, longtime producers on our show. Adam Abdallah, longtime producer on the show, to Tyler and Charlie now. There's so many. I'm just riffing, but it's not Waddle and Silvy without any of those. Waddle and Silvy doesn't exist without any of those people in the form that you hear it. So, a lot of belief behind me. I'm always grateful for that belief. And we're very fortunate that we've had a tight-knit group over the years at ESPN 1000.
No, Silvy, just to wrap it up, coming from a fan myself, I appreciate your passion not only for Chicago sports, but how much you remember in the fans that call in and how much you care deeply about each team. And, like you say, Chicago wants to hump. You're one of those guys you're one of those guys that you can be critical, but I always say you're fair. And, I think that's what makes radio and not hot tape TV shows. So appreciate you doing what you do, not only for me, but millions of fans across, and subscribe to their YouTube channel because I know you're on a road to 1 million subscribers. So
that's right. Good luck with that. But we're up to like 21,700, I think. Okay. So
hey, I'm already in on it. I'm an early investor.
What did I tell you about keeping one day at a time, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna keep grinding. So thank you. It was a pleasure to talk, Lucas.
Silvy, appreciate you, and I'll catch you today from 2 to 6 Central Time.
You got it. Thank you.